lawsuits. Why? It is forbidden to leave the train alive. Why? 1,000 human beings on a journey to nowhere with one-way tickets to hell.
The soul of Detroit.
You asked it around your question around my face. It's gone.
What are you doing?
That is not paid for by them. That is paid for by the people of Detroit.
You might be qualified, ML.
I'm not qualified for this job.
Let me tell you something. You want to go right now? Okay? You want to go right now?
Hey kids, it's your old pal ML Elric. We are getting a little late start here on the Soul of Detroit because I took the QLine here. Well, actually, no, I didn't, because we're in Ferndale, which is a little further down Woodward than the QLine runs, because the QLine ends not at Hell, as Mark's intro would suggest, but at Grand Boulevard, which is looking pretty good. And the people who brought us the QLine like to take a lot of credit for that. Well, we're going to talk about how the QLine got here, along with a special guest, Bill Shea, formerly of Crane's Detroit Business, who's now with The Athletic, who watched this blow by blow until it got here, and some people think now it just plain blows. And then we've got Mark Feldhauer and Sean Windsor, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, great. What a powerful intro.
I was trying to be brief.
I was just expecting some dynamic content from Sean.
Somebody said something about that.
I'm never dynamic at all.
There it is.
Is that what you're looking for?
That's a force multiplier in broadcast.
No, what I've decided today is that I want to hear Mike twice. So I've got the headphone on one side and the live ear to your voice on the other, so that way I can hear you in double time.
Well, the logic of that eludes me, but I appreciate the vote of confidence.
That's how dynamic and amazing you are. And I just thought I cannot sit through this podcast anymore without
It looks great, though.
getting as much Elric as I can.
Jeez. Well, I'll tell you who's dynamic and exciting and also a very handsome man who can help you at a time when we're all wondering what's going on with our retirement plans, our investments. Where do we go? What do we do? Is it time to jump off the top of the building, or is it time to just kind of get in the fetal position and pretend that it's going to be all right? That's Luke Nowacki of Pinnacle Wealth Strategies. We're going to tell you in a little while how Luke can help you preserve your wealth, build your wealth, and prepare for retirement. And in the meantime, if you need some dough, David Hall of Hall Financial, his team over there can help you get the finance you need to buy a house, refinance your house, take cash out of your house. Basically, they're the ones who can help you figure out how to get the deal done. They've done it twice for me. It's worked out great. I think they can help you as well. And we will be telling you how to connect with these fine businesses after we talk a little bit with our special guest, Bill Shea, who is a great reporter. He used to cover media comings and goings. So he and I have talked a lot because I keep coming and going. But
It's all about you, right, Mark?
Always.
I think one of the
He
listeners
just covered you. Was it the Elrician beat?
Yeah,
pretty much.
One of the listeners wrote a little while ago about how they loved how I take over everything. At least I think that's what they said, unless I got it backwards.
Love's a strong word.
I'll make it about myself because Bill is the one that broke the story of Drew and Mike leaving Riff and Dave and Chuck coming in May of 2013.
I did.
Who's your source? No.
Oh, God, I don't even...
You probably wouldn't remember.
I was on the couch, I think, and it was a tweet. I don't remember.
I would. So what? From my perspective, what we obviously knew it was going to happen. We weren't going to say anything, and we were at the end of a show, and there was a sales meeting, and like right at the end of the sales meetings when it broke, it's like, oh, someone in the sales. They told the sales staff, and someone looked at.
What did they say? Like, anybody have anything else? Like, oh yeah, we're getting rid of Drew.
No, that's what the meeting was about. The change that they were going to make.
Well, I remember when I think Drew found out about it was at Matt Riley's tailgate before the Michigan State game, and I thought I was going to the game with Drew and Charlie, and Charlie got distracted with some recreational stuff, and Drew kind of just didn't make it to the game, and then I found out the next day, Dave and Chuck the Freak are going to Riff.
I think you might be combining stories. You sure that wasn't...
maybe there's 105.
That was 2015 when Drew left 105.1. But that's okay.
Oh, that's what it was.
Way to combine stories.
That's what... Oh, you're right, because there was...
Or as Mike would use, or say, conflate. That's more of a Mike word.
I think you conflated the story.
I don't even like hearing Sean once. I don't know why he wants to hear me twice. This doesn't really seem like a fair exchange.
What we're saying, Bill, is a good job.
Yeah,
breaking all these stories.
Yeah, great job, Bill.
Bill is on the stuff, and I forgot to ask you, Mark. Could we get a music bed and come on Ride It by the Quad City DJs at some point?
Yeah, Ride the Train. Yeah,
yeah, it's a great tune.
And by the way,
I don't know if we have the rights for
may I
it.
just add?
Maybe we'll just do it a cappella.
Let me just add. I knew when I saw your QLine column the other day that was our show, but I want to tell you, Bill, he often writes a column, but it's not enough for him to come in and talk about it. He wants to bring a guest in to talk about him and his work.
Yeah, but he's digging
we're kinda-
deeper.
We're
That's
kind of
okay.
doubling down.
No, I'm giving credit where it's due. And one of the reasons I was able to write so authoritatively about the evolution of the QLine is because Bill Shea was on top of this thing from the beginning, and he wrote one of the most prophetic and powerful things ever written on the topic, which is what happens if the tax, the millage for transportation doesn't pass? What is the QLine or M1 Rail's backup plan? And he said, there is no plan B.
Yeah, that's when they were trying to pass the transit tax a million years ago, whenever that was. But yeah, I asked, and I guess it was just sort of the inertia of the oligarchy assumed that we're going to get the money, so we can manipulate things. And
Because people around here, particularly in Macomb County and Oakland County, love nothing, and Western Wayne County love nothing more than extending transportation into their boroughs. The burgers out there love to spend money to help people from Detroit get into their neighborhoods.
Yeah, there is a traditional animosity, if I'm being kind about describing
Yeah, that's a euphemism.
about the suburbs and the city cooperating on mass transit, which is why we have 5 bus systems, if you count Ann Arbor and other areas. But yeah, it's mass transit around here has always been a huge mess that is a reflection of the wider and deeper issues in the metro region, to be polite.
Well, this article appeared in 2016 before the QLine had really started rolling, but when you asked them what their backup plan was, M1 Rail issued a statement to you, and do you recall the gist of that?
No.
Well, let me.
And the reason is everything.
We
prior
workshopped this, believe me, folks.
Everything prior to like 2017 is sort of a mishmash because part of it's changing careers and what I write about. But I do recall that basically it was, they weren't worried.
Yeah.
And that was sort of a reflection, I think, of the personalities and the egos involved in that thing at the highest level.
Well, if you read my column, which we'll post on our website, it's on the free website. We can also read Sean Windsor's work, speaking of Trains to Nowhere. But there was a very definitive statement that I quote where they basically said, the M1 Rail that runs the QLine said, if the funding source doesn't come through, we will take care of it. We will keep this thing going. And to me, the debate is not
when
whether
you say we, who's we?
M1 Rail, the benefactors, the people who put it together, the donors, the meaning, people like Peter Carmanos, Roger Penske, the Illich family, Dan Gilbert, the Kresge Foundation put almost like $50 million
All
into
the big
this.
players.
Right. The people who basically said this is the way to go and we're going to make it happen. They kind of said, well, not really kind of. They said, if this doesn't work out the way we think it's going to work out, don't worry about it. We gotcha. And they should be credited for putting over $100 million, maybe as much as $125 million into this thing. We did put some money in through our federal transportation administration, $25 million or more. But they said, this is going to work. We figured it out. It's going to work. Don't worry about it. They told Bill, if we're wrong, not a problem. So to me, the debate really isn't about whether the QLine is any good, whether it's reached its full potential, and there have been some setbacks with COVID and people working from home that we have to account for. But to me, the real issue with this is, like all public transportation, it needs to be subsidized. Like all public transportation proposals, it hasn't met its benchmarks. And then we were basically drawn into supporting it for the next 17 years to the tune of $5 million a year without so much as an opportunity to be heard on that, because the funding that will provide it $5 million a year in taxpayer money for the next 17 years was approved at the last minute by the legislature in the lame duck session and then signed by the governor on December 29th. So without even asking us whether we were cool with this or allowing us to have a really meaningful debate on the future of public transportation in southeastern Michigan, we just got the bill. And that's the problem, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate reflection of the situation. It's, it's the donor class, basically, in Detroit, the power structure, the people that dictate how capital moves through Metro Detroit decided we want this, we'll get it. It benefits their interests directly downtown.
How so specifically? Is it just because they all have property along
it's,
that 3 miles?
the District Detroit and all of that.
CompuWare building.
Yeah, it directly serves their physical, brick and mortar structures down there. And, Kresge and all that serve the wider purpose of benefiting things. And, after decades of not getting anything done, there was the opportunity to do this. They did it. Like you said, COVID hit, and there was a lot of, I think, optimistic magical thinking around some of this stuff. It was going to be part of a wider system, and it would get extended up Woodward and to the suburbs and all of this.
Can I ask you about that? Because from sitting on the sidelines, and obviously you and ML have done far more research on this than I have. But sitting on the sidelines, that's how it was sold to us. This is going to be spokes going out further, and it's going to come up to the Detroit Zoo.
Plug and play, right? This is the first brick in this mighty fortress of public transportation we're going to build.
Not even the first brick. The people mover was intended to be part of a larger system, and our street level people mover now is intended to be part of a larger system. But we buy the HO scale train because we're going to have the whole train set one day. Well, we have one piece of track and one car. And
was that ever a possibility, or was this just lip service paid to the public?
Oh, it's always a possibility. It's
a realistic possibility. When they first started,
Metro Detroit realistic and the word realistic are not always the same. I'm surprised they did get this done. They did get it done. Having a regional system, I've been to cities all over the world with bigger problems than Detroit. They have them, subways and elevated train and cool stuff. And we, and for a lot of very well-established reasons, this geographically we don't get along here for a lot of reasons. Can it be done? Yes. Realistically, in my lifetime, maybe at the end of it, and I hope that's a long time from now. But yeah, and I think because of the younger millennials and Gen Z, whatever generation
those people hate driving.
Yeah, and so I think we could see extensions, but for all the criticism of the QLine, it was intended to go up Woodward much farther, and there were plans. There was whatever that city proposal. Go beyond. It was going to go to 8 Mile, number one,
right? And where we have the transit hub, and then it could go to Pontiac, and it could go to Birmingham, and then, but the problem with it is. And I love public transportation. People have suggested that I somehow am a hitman on public transportation. That's insane, but you can read the column and find out about my experience with public transportation. But if you take the trains in Europe, the gauge, the rail in Spain is different from the rest of Europe. So if you want to take a train from France to Spain, you have to stop at the Spanish border and change trains. There's sort of the same problem here. The way this system is built, the cars are not meant for high speed, and frankly, there aren't enough of them, but you could always buy more. But this is not something where you would just say, okay, what we have now, we're just going to run all the way down through Highland Park, out to Royal Oak and all that other stuff. You'd have to kind of come in and say, now I'm on the QLine portion of the train. And you do see that on some public transit where there's like a downtown loop and, you change trains on almost every major transportation system. But this thing, people want to run down the middle of Woodward. Well, the guys who built it didn't. They want to run along the curbs so that it could be, frankly, stop at their theater, their ballpark. Bill said he kind of had an idea where the hockey rink was going to be going because of where the QLine stops were being penciled in, and that turned out to be true. This thing was really meant to serve this area. And if you're someone who's trying to get lickety-split from downtown out to the suburbs, this is not what you're going to take. It takes 15 minutes to get from Congress down by Hart Plaza to Grand Boulevard. And if you want to get out to the suburbs fast or to the airport, you're going to have to take something quicker. And my problem with the people mover and with the QLine from a design standpoint is, unlike the T in Boston, or let me just stick with the T in Boston, there's no huge commuter lot where you can say, I'm going to ditch my car here for free and I'm going to ride the train all day. if you want to ride the People Mover or the QLine, you're still going to have to pay a lot of money to park somewhere. And so if you're going to drive downtown to use it, why not just park where you're going? Yeah. I mean, they've kind of made it less useful to people, and cheap vacant land downtown is really hard to find now, whereas when they built this, well, maybe some of that land they wanted for a hockey rink, I guess. Maybe that's why they didn't build a lot like that would make it more useful. You get off the lodge, ditch your car, tool around all day, and then toddle off home. It just, whatever. If they put up the money and it didn't work, that's on them. But now we're paying for it, and that's where I have a problem with it.
Yeah, and from the start, the business class had said, we're not building this thing out to 8 Mile. We're not going out to Royal Oak with it. Government has to step up. And when you say government, we all think of this big monolithic, whatever, the county, the city.
Trilateral, the guys in Davos.
Or that, yeah. And it's not. It's us. We elect people who want to be part of a regional transit system, or they are very much against it. And we have those political leaders all over the city and Metro Detroit. But, to their credit, the M1 guys at the start were saying, we're not going to pay for, because it's really expensive to build these things. It can be, some of the estimates I saw to get it out to Royal Oak, it was in the billions. Like, it's a lot.
Isn't that what's tricky, this balance of a public-private partnership? I mean, it's public transportation on public roads, so you got to have some kind of agreement. But to me, it seems like they were all going towards one goal that seemed to be less than satisfactory.
Yeah, and I think that's the story of mass transit in Metro Detroit, is no one is happy about sort of the compromises made all along the way. And, they wanted this to be an entirely privately funded project with basically no oversight.
That's just
and the feds,
bad, right? I mean,
they learned.
Prisoner's dilemma almost.
It was interesting to see these super powerful, wealthy people get a reality check lesson early on in the process. The feds are like, no, this, Woodward has state and federal designations to it. If you want, and they wanted state and federal money too to help beyond the public. And they were told, no, you can't. We can't just surrender a major artery to the private sector, as much as the private sector would like that. So they had to fall within all the transportation laws and rules. And, if you think tax code is a big, thick book, seeing some of the federal transit rules and things and how the money is played out, the $25 million, they were waving that at Metro Detroit forever, and like you and I talked about when Ray LaHood, when he was transit secretary, did the big fake check or whatever, $25 million, that's pocket change in the Department of Transportation. He's, that was in his couch. That's not a lot of money for the amount of money moving through transit in this country. And that's part, we need officials at the federal level, representatives, senators, that say, hey, we want a system. We want to pay to get people from Pontiac to downtown.
That's how a good economy works. People are mobile. Things are mobile.
And they need to get us the funding for that. This, even whatever the state surplus is right now, however many $1 billion.
$9.2 billion, I think.
That wouldn't get you a QLine fast and downtown slow to Pontiac.
And why a half-assed effort?
Was there ever a push at all for a light rail, like say Minneapolis has? That's a pretty good example, because you're talking about cities, and both y'all have seen subway systems, but those go back 100 plus years. Predate the car in some ways, and lots of, let's just say, racial issues, because that's what we're talking about when we're talking about Metro Detroit. That's why it was voted down. That's why the suburbs don't want it. I saw it in your comments section on your, all you do is go look at the comments the other day.
I don't look at the comments.
I don't look at them on mine, but sometimes I do on others. And sure enough, we don't want folks with that kind of access out there. Now, I know that's who knows what percentage that is. I don't want to say it's a huge percentage, but in any case, the Minneapolis system, and I've used that. You can go from the airport downtown, and it's light rail, and it gets up to decent speeds. Was there ever a push?
Yeah. There was
here
discussion of it when Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick was in Congress. They was talking about money, and there was going to be a light rail system, and there have been, I don't know how many projects, and I just have stacks of file folders on running rail between Detroit and Ann Arbor, to the airport too.
Right.
That makes total sense for commuters, like big events, just daily stuff. You need the parking lots too. But I've seen scheme after scheme for this stuff, and just nothing ever comes of it. Because number one, the cost. Number two, the cooperation. MDOT's been involved, and they were going to run a demonstration line, and they have a yard full of like redone rail cars to do this. And nothing ever happened. And part of that is too, passenger rail lines share freight rail lines, and the freight rail gets priority. And taking Amtrak between Detroit and Chicago, is it going to be 4 hours?
Yeah,
Is it going to be
right.
2 days?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, it could be kidnapped down there.
Spin the
and
wheel
trapped.
and see. Yeah. So that's part of the problem too, is you don't have dedicated lines for some of this. But when you talk about light rail, heavy rail, people circulation, we had that back in the day, because when they pulled up Woodward
Trolley cars, right? Yeah.
when they pulled up Woodward to put in the QLine tracks, we were pulling up the old tracks from the 1950s that got buried. They're still down there.
Oh, you can see them on Michigan Avenue in between the bricks. Those rails are still there.
And the old interurban, that used to run to Port Huron and places. So we had it. And then if you get really nerd out into the transit history, it's the General Motors buses back in the 50s. And there was a big case about this. Like, basically the city, if I remember right, was basically paid off. Like, get rid of your rail system, because we're gonna make buses. We want Detroit to have buses. And
then let me guess, they didn't? Or
no, they got the buses.
Okay.
And we paved over the rail lines and things like that. And there was some court case about it, and I think GM ended up paying $1 or something like that. And it was way back in the day. I mean, this has always been political. It's always been profit-minded.
Well, let me ask you this. To that point, this is Motown, right? We love our cars. I just always assumed, when cars got huge, people just wanted to drive their own cars. You have the freedom there. This QLine issue, and it's a disaster. I don't care what anyone says. The thing is a disaster. Is that uniquely Detroit and Michigan, or are there other cities? I remember they always compared it to Milwaukee and whatever they have there. Do they have the kind of issues? Do people ride it in other cities, or is this just strictly Detroit, Michigan?
Yeah, I don't know that there was any other city that has a comparable transit history to ours where we had it at one time. I mean, we used to have rail cars pulled by horses in Detroit back in the 19th century. And then we got rid of it, and we are the auto capital of the world.
But just a bloated public transportation, not even system, but one segment of it that really doesn't go very far and costs a lot of money, and no one uses it.
There's places all over Dallas and things like that, but typically they are still part of a wider system, or at least a light rail system that may go to the airport that has utility beyond a Pistons game and then eating at Townsend or whatever.
So stupid.
Yeah, I mean, Buffalo has light rail. Pittsburgh has light rail. Towns that are smaller than
Cleveland has a little bit, right? Yeah. LA's system has struggled for a while. I think they have more users now at this point.
The LA is one of the big examples, but it's also because it's a massive highway city, and we all joke about stuck on the 405 in traffic.
But even in LA, I went from La Cienega Boulevard to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena on the rail. I mean,
the thing with
it can be done.
Yeah, it can be, and they have.
And you might see Keanu Reeves.
True.
Was he on there? He's on the bus.
Speed.
They have a fairly.
That's how he
This
got
was
Dennis
rail.
Hopper.
This was rail.
That's how he got Dennis Hopper.
Watch the whole movie next time.
Yeah.
They have a fairly comprehensive system, but
I saw that one guy blew his finger off.
but it doesn't look like much because of the huge highway system, and there's 20 million people in the LA metro down to San Diego. It's just like it's never going to look like much. But if you took all of LA's mass transit, like the rail systems, and stuck them here, we'd have a damn train on every street just about.
Well, and here's some of the, I don't know if I exactly call it irony, but Matt Cullen, who was with GM, was one of the people really pushing for the M1 line. So GM was presumably for this. And one of the things. No, I think they just saw the business sense in it. Either that, or now they're downtown, so they want people to be able to get from. But it doesn't go to the Ren Center. Where
why don't we have a subway system? That's the bigger question.
Well, hold on
because
a second.
that goes way back.
Before we get to that, one of the plans that the city really was pushing, and some other public transit fans were pushing, was that the Q line would either not be there or would be supplemented by rapid buses that would take some dedicated lines and be more like trams, where you'd have lanes for them and they'd run off of overhead wires and stuff like that. So we can have rapid transit with buses, and you do see the fast line that I think Smart does. It goes to the airport and some other places. That's some of the more successful routes on the bus line. So we can have public transportation that works with buses, but you're talking about going underground. I remember
No,
when
I'm
I
not
was
saying
out.
we should do that now. I'm just saying we missed that, right? There were political reasons for not, when most cities back in those days were building and we did not.
Well, I think one reason is we had land like nobody else. You know, I mean, you go to Boston, it's been around since what, 1600 or something. I mean, everything's so tightly packed. We're going to dig down. You're by water. I mean, I'm no geologist, but it seems to me that you don't have to go underground, and that can be expensive too. But we have lots of space to put this thing down. Why do we spend $1 billion to add another lane to I-75 when we know as soon as it's built, it's not going to be at capacity, when you could just put a rail line down the middle of it like they have in Chicago, which I know would be more than $1 billion. But when you spend $1 billion on something that's already obsolete by the time you spend it, that doesn't seem like money well spent to me.
The elevated system's the way to go. I mean, is there an American city that's built a subway system since D.C. did back in the, 70s, 60s? I mean, they all go back to the last century, turn of the last century.
They
right?
extend them, like if you have a 100-year-old
like New
system.
York it spent how many billions tunneling out up the east side,
And
upper east
the
side.
big dig in Boston 20 years ago.
Yep.
I mean, that was just, that was one
But
of those
building a
things.
subway from scratch is not. I mean, that's not realistic, right? But what you're talking
Is
about,
not Elon Musk doing something with a big tunnel?
Boring
Boring
company.
company.
Yeah,
He-
the
he
boring
invented
company.
tunnels.
Yeah, that's been a big failure.
And I just read last.
they wanted to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just read last week about something in the New York Times where Facebook was going to try and beat all the traffic and the congestion around their headquarters by reopening a rail bridge to give and they abandoned that too, and they got more money than any.
Remember a few years ago in,
it's expensive and
in
hard to do.
California, they wanted to run a high-speed rail from
San
L.A. to
Francisco.
San Francisco. Yeah.
Now they just bump rails.
Okay. Well, I think they've been doing that a long time.
That was
On
weak.
mirrors.
Okay. So,
No, I
no,
thought that
we
was-
got the joke. Everyone.
Yeah.
It just wasn't funny.
I thought that people smoke now anyway.
So why are you extending that
More
joke?
of an immediate high. No.
He heard it twice. It wasn't funny either time. That's rejection, baby.
Not funny
That's
in
rejection.
stereo.
Yeah, that's right.
So $85 million this bill is signed, right? On how many years forward does this go? Because if it costs $5 million a year to upkeep now, what is the end of it? Is it 10 years? Is it how many years?
It'll go forever.
Yeah.
So they're just going to keep throwing bad money after bad money.
Well, here's what should scare you, other than the fact that this was done in a very undemocratic way. It's $5 million a year for 17 years.
17 years?
I don't know how they picked 17, but here's the other thing: is people are saying we shouldn't worry about this because the money is really coming from a tax on liquor and hotel stays. So it's not coming out of your tax pocket, your taxpayer pocket. It's just tax money that we're recapturing and repurposing.
Yeah, but it can be spent better than that.
Exactly. Well, let's have a $5 million a year better convention center. How about that? Or let's extend the QLine to the convention center to make it easier for our visitors to get to and from our beautiful ballparks and stadium and theaters.
$10 million a year to take care of that.
Right. So there's that issue. But the other thing is this thing costs $9.9 million a year to operate. That means it's still being paid for by private money, by sponsorships, by grants, by you name it. So here's the nightmare scenario: is those folks eventually say, okay, we're done subsidizing this. So now the $5 million a year subsidy turns into a $10 million a year subsidy. And maybe you have to raise the hotel and liquor tax, in which case we're not as attractive as a convention site because it costs more to book your conventions here. I mean,
Or you just pull the cars.
Yeah.
Eventually, and we got tracks down the middle of Woodward.
Well, that's why I'm against spend the money to expand I-75
like in
because
Corktown when you see the tracks in the brick. To your point,
until gas gets to be $5 a gallon, and I love cars. I just bought an '85 Buick Riviera, so I'm a car guy like nobody
it's more
else.
of a status thing with you, though. It's not really a transportation thing.
So judgy, but
I know. How many times have we heard about that Buick?
yeah.
Well, I'm not judgmental at all. I think
I'm
that's
just
great
saying,
that you like cars.
I love
like
public
to crochet.
transportation, and
You know what
I
mean?
love rides, but the
like the
thing
knit,
is,
sorry.
until people have to pay $5 a gallon for gas and are stuck in traffic for 2 hours to get to and fro, public transportation is really never going to be their first choice because it's not the best option.
Yeah, but as Bill was saying, the younger generation, they seem to want this kind of rail service, this kind of transportation.
They don't. They want to work remotely and they want a car so they can deliver food. Really.
Oh, Bill's right.
I think there's truth in that, but part of the problem is they're not conditioned to it because it's not available. It's not, you're not growing up. Like if you grew up in Brooklyn or Queens or other places, you take the train to get around.
To your point real quickly, how would people vote in Lower Manhattan right now if they're going to say, hey, we're going to connect this to the Bronx?
Oh, they're going to vote no.
Exactly. I mean, that's
the other.
And that's what we face here, right?
That's the other thing. Even if the younger generation wants it and they're willing to pay for it, and who knows if they'll even have jobs because the whole wealth thing in this country, but it all comes down to the political wherewithal. Are we going to elect people who have the backbone to push for these things, for the financing, for the regulatory stuff, and just getting the cooperation? We have moments where we got the RTA and things like that. Well, what's going on with all of that? We still have all of these transportation systems that, if you could wave a magic wand, go back to the start and have a genuine, like a New York Port Authority that covers a ton of stuff. Like we would have, a single bus service.
Mob contracts.
Yeah, exactly. But we would have like a single bus service and it would cover, the airlines. It would cover, we would have like a proper ferry or something to Windsor and, the bridge thing, all of that could be under a single authority or some type of authority like that.
The history doesn't allow it, though.
No,
because
that's
it's
the
still
thing.
To your point. I mean, we know about 8 Mile for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It's part of the consciousness for a reason. You don't go from Chicago to Arlington and understand where the actual street.
That's history. I mean, if there was money to be made in it too, it could be done.
To Mike's point, we just voted. How long ago was the vote that we voted on the regional transportation tax?
2016.
Okay, so seven.
No,
years.
excuse me. Was it? No, maybe 27. Anyways.
Yeah,
right
that's
around
not
there.
history, right? That's now.
No, but
but
at the same time in Chicago, there's racism is a terrible problem in some of the
It's
Chicago
just within the
south
city.
suburbs.
It's south and north. Yeah.
But the subway, the L goes all the way through the south side. It goes out to the south suburbs. The commuter rail
all the way
goes
to
out to the
O'Hare,
south
right?
side.
I mean, it's
I mean,
to
so
Midway
it's more than just racism, but some of it is people are cheap. Some people think they don't need it, so why would they pay for something that somebody else has? And I just always argue, well, listen, if you don't put some money in the pot to help people get to work, you're going to put some money in the pot to help them survive on welfare, and I'd rather make it easier for somebody to get to a job.
Well, and we find that with as communities get older, and it comes, there's a school millage up. Well, my kids are graduated. I'm not voting for that.
It's the same with healthcare. Yeah, no, for sure.
Transportation.
And you know what I always say to people, just talking about school millages, well, what kind of neighborhood do you want to be in? Where do you want those kids? Do you want those kids to have a good school to go to? They live in your community?
I think part of the problem, though, is when you see the things they come up with, like the QLine, it's like, well, why would I want to pay for another bad idea? The investment, the way it's being used doesn't always match.
And part of this, too, is going back to the origins of M1 Rail and all these projects. They should have sold this to the public as it will need some type of subsidy because every transit system in the, since Ugg and Thor were rolling a rock down out of their cave and charging people for it, has required some type of subsidy. I think you just needed to be honest and say this. We're not building just another people mover at ground level. This needs to be part of a bigger vision. We'll pay for the thing, but it's gonna need funding along the way. And in an ideal Pollyanna world,
I was gonna say you're so naive. You want honest messaging from a public-private partnership.
I know, right?
It's like the gas stoves.
Exactly.
But you're right.
And we're also dealing with 40 plus years of there's a large ideological faction in this country that says government is the problem. Vote no on everything.
Thank you, Mr. Reagan.
And that permeates down to the local level. And all politics are local. I mean, it's what affects you, your pocketbook, your kids, your job, things like that. And until we get out of the mindset, government can be problematic. But we're government. It's when we screw up something, and people screw up in government. I screw up in my job, and there's criminals and just honest. All of that stuff is just part of the human race and how we operate as a society. Yeah, it's us. But the messaging of government's evil and no taxes and I don't have any. Well, taxes are the price of society. I've always believed
It's
in
your
that.
enemy to
So,
need a friend, right?
yeah,
Isn't that the saying?
I lived in New Hampshire where there's no sales or income tax, right? So we're all thinking that's paradise. Okay, well, you know how much it costs to register your car? An arm and a friggin' leg. You know what property taxes are like? Property taxes are so high that people can't afford to buy a house. You know what fees and registrations are for various things? Listen, shit costs $1. Whether you put 50 cents in one category, a quarter over there, 2 dimes and a nickel, it's $1. So be prepared to spend $1 and quit thinking you're going to save a nickel somewhere because it's $1. That's it.
You know, one of the comments, and I know you don't read your comments, but one of the comments was from somebody upstate
Teeb says, Shea Dog.
saying,
I
"Oh,
read my
this is
comments.
just great. I'm going to pay for a line in Detroit." And I just thought, it's really too bad because it's kind of to your point. If something was happening in Antrim City where they needed state tax dollars to do it, I would think and it's going to make that place better. Great.
Well, we're all going to pay
not
for the
separate. That's the problem. It's not just
Yeah.
in Michigan. If something happens in Missouri that needs federal dollars, and we have to take a turn with that, great.
We're all going to help pay for the flooding in Midland, right? I mean, I don't think there's anybody in Detroit saying, I don't care if people in Midland drown. We don't even think about it that way. But when you talk about doing something in Detroit, it's like, I don't know if I want those guys coming out to Livonia. It gets really stupid.
Or the flooding in California, the flooding in Texas.
And
right?
the other problem is our elected officials, some of whom have been lavishly supported by some of the people behind the QLine, are out there demagoguing and saying, it's like, well, I'm going to defend our county from having our tax dollars spent to support that place. And that's how they get reelected. It's like, well, maybe what you should be doing is be a leader and get out front and say, listen, these guys aren't that bad. They're not that different from us. And you like to go to the Wings games, right? How about you go to the Wings game and drink all those expensive beers and not worry about getting pulled over on your way home because you can get on the damn train? I mean, it doesn't really seem that complicated to me. And again, I come back to the QLine itself is a fine little entity, and I don't mean to diminish it by saying it little, but by just basically pulling this money out of our pockets, it's deprived us of the very conversation we're having right now, and it puts off the need to have that conversation, which is we tried to do something in 2016. It didn't work. It's time for us to try and bring the community, the neighborhood, the leadership, the region, whatever together to finally get this thing done. And it's just not going to happen because we put a Band-Aid, and it's an expensive Band-Aid, and we're paying for it.
Light rail up the spokes.
But yeah,
all the way out. That's
how it works.
Yeah.
And like they said from the start, this has got, to their credit, they said it has to be part of a bigger system. But when you drive up Woodward, when you get to the terminus, those rails go into the garage. Yeah. There's not a spur line. Like if you ever played with model trains as a kid, the pieces, like there's the curved pieces that also keeps going where you just stop it in the concrete. Yeah. They didn't build that.
And the streetcars.
And I wrote a whole story like, why isn't, whereas you've said this, we're going to go north, we're going to go to Royal Oak, or we're going to go to the fairgrounds. You didn't, it's not the biggest thing in the world to tear up the street, but it is more expense, and that expense will be paid for by us. Yeah, they didn't.
They knew it wasn't going to.
They knew they weren't going to do it.
Well,
see, there you go. Yeah.
That's where I think, and I wrote in the column, either by default or by design, I think this is what they want because Dan Gilbert doesn't own a bunch of buildings in Royal Oak. The Illiches don't have a bunch of properties in Oakland County. So helping you get from downtown Detroit, where they have so many things, to someplace else, hey, man, I want a captive audience for my buildings, my businesses, my venues, my restaurants, my neighborhoods. I think this is what they wanted. I think they got what they wanted. And it serves them very well.
Yeah,
so they should pay for it.
I still think
Penske would be the exception to that, but I think the argument is, hey, everybody, Penske's doing everything he can to save Detroit, so maybe this is just more and some people were mad that I took a shot at him for saying maybe the only reason he's involved is because he feels guilty for getting Kwame Kilpatrick reelected, but he did, and he should.
Yeah, but I still think it makes, and whether they would ever genuinely agree to this, but if you run that line out to a Royal Oak or up to Pontiac, you get more people coming down to your games, to your shows, to your Broadway.
And they're aware of that, right, Bill? I mean,
they know.
It's both. Can it be both?
Yeah, but the Illiches own a lot of parking lots, and some of Dan Gilbert's buildings have some parking structures. So
Yeah, well, north.
But what's the percentage of that to what Bill's talking about, bringing in potential thousands and thousands of people,
Yeah,
right?
and-
I mean,
in
the
having
math is, yeah.
and having stops at like the fairgrounds, there was discussion. Okay,
can park
if you live in Ferndale or Royal Oak or whatever, you can park there, take it down, and then
Or the
it's just
zoo.
right
There's
up.
a nice
or
big
the
parking lot
zoo.
there,
There's a
yeah.
lot of stuff there, or all the way up to Plymouth. You got to have the parking lots for cars, or it stops where people can easily access the line. I mean, it makes all the economic sense if we think there is enough people that will regularly use it. And north of Grand River, it has to be a speedier. And those cars can get, I forget what the speed, because I did all sorts of reporting, because there's only a handful of companies in the world that makes these vehicles, and they take years. Like, you can't just be like, give me 6 more. Well, we'll get you 6 more, but it's going to be 3 or 4 years from now.
It's like building a fighter jet. You have to plan ahead, and they're handcrafted. These are
they're basically.
But you can
There's no
change,
assembly line.
change the rail a little bit and the speed, right? With different kind of. I mean, I'm thinking about.
we got up to 28 miles an hour.
No,
which I don't think is bad.
If you get out, like, obviously, I mean, there should be a train to the west to the airport that goes all the way out to Ann Arbor. You could make an argument for it going up to Grand River to Farmington and eventually a train to Lansing. I mean, I was on 96 yesterday up there for the basketball game, and I'm sure. But this
there is
goes,
a train to Lansing.
No,
but
I'm
it's
just saying,
Amtrak.
if we really had the willpower, and we could do it.
It all costs money, and we don't trust them to spend the money on a good. I mean, because look what they did with this money.
But you know what you're saying, and to Bill's point, this is the thing, and I love you, man. But you're saying we and them, and there's no we and them.
There's us, and then there's the people that built the QLine. Is what I'm talking about.
No, but it's still all us.
That's a beautiful moment.
No, but until we stop thinking about we and them, and I'm not trying to pick on you, it's never going to happen. You're right.
Leave Mark alone.
You can pick on me all you want.
And leave Brittany alone while you're at it.
I would love to have the Sean Windsor rail dream that you just mentioned.
Because
it's not realistic.
But we see it happen in other parts in this country. You can, I mean, forget Europe, forget Canada. By the way, Toronto has a streetcar system and a subway system.
If you want to take it bigger than Detroit, they've talked about high-speed rail across this country for years.
I'm not talking about across the country. I'm talking about metropolitan. L.A. just did it in the last 30 years, 25 years or so, roughly.
And we had it again. We pulled the tracks out,
so it can be done.
You could take the old interurbans out to Pontiac, to Port Huron, and that's I used to make that drive every day, and it was 2 hours back in the day to get home and through on 94. But
it's also
they ran it up there. Like, it has been done.
It's also important to remember, though, because we get caught up in nostalgia, is that people hated the streetcar. It was unreliable. There was corruption. So it's not like we tore down something that was everybody's dream to put some buses out there. This thing was jacked up, but instead of fixing it, they kind of went another way.
They did. And, it's corruption everywhere. But people tolerate corruption, like the old Chicago canard. Well, the trash got picked up on time. So you're like, all right, this guy's on the take, but my tax dollars, my city services are working.
Oh, yeah.
People really hate corruption when the corrupt politicians aren't getting basic, and we've been in Detroit a long time. We know what corruption looks like, where people don't get the very basic human civil services. Their trash picked up. The ambulance is showing up.
It's the same reason drug dealers can be beloved in a country, because they give back to the people.
Yeah,
it's fictional.
Huh?
Fictional.
What do you mean?
Right?
No, that happens. That happens.
You love drug dealers?
No. The people that live in the area, in Medellin or wherever, because they take care of the poor people and they give them stuff that the government's not doing. So you're going to turn up.
You've been watching too much Narcos, but yes.
Never seen it.
I do love my drug dealer. I just want CVS pharmacy, and but no, it's
your dealer's from Woonsocket, Rhode Island.
But yeah, I mean, it comes down. That's all the historic stuff. People hated the old, and I'm sure they were grimy and awful and late, but they don't have to be. Like, there are, like the underground in London. I took it for a few weeks when I was over there. Worked fine. I'm like, God damn, why can't we have something like this?
Yeah, the Metro in D.C.
The Metro, yeah.
Rubber
That's the
tires.
newest system in our country, right? Subway system.
I think so. I mean, of that of that size.
Although
and
they've had
scale.
some issues in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, you'll never. I mean, we have issues with the highways. I mean, I live
true. No.
at 75 and 9 Mile, and just trying to get over the highway or north to like Oakland Mall or whatever is an adventure. You have to plan. You know, it's Sam and Frodo trying to return the ring to Marshall's or whatever. It's impossible at times. So trains, roads, all of it's corrupt. All of it will break down. There's always going to be issues because it's public.
But yeah, don't we accept a little bit of corruption if, like you were to your point, we accept the corruption if it works.
We shouldn't, but we do. But if it works, and here it doesn't work. For a lot of part of it's just the physical geography of where we live. Chicago has similar issues to Detroit, but the racial geography. Nobody has the 8 Mile, which in some places is a literal damn wall. Like, in all of the history that goes with that, it's a political history, racial, financial, it's all tied together. And, and it's in living memory. The 67 riot rebellion, the bullet holes are still in some of the buildings over on 12th Street. Like, that's in living memory. I have relatives that still are in-laws and stuff, like, they haven't been downtown since they recall seeing tanks on the street.
I know folks in the
67.
same. Yep.
Yeah, and not even like, oh, we went in for a Tigers game. No, just have never gone back. The boomers and Gen X and stuff. There are a lot of people like that's a point of pride with them. Oh, we don't go downtown.
And they're not going to vote for a tax.
Exactly.
Those are the people that are saying no, basically.
It's a generational thing, but I do have some optimism that 50 years from now, 100 years from now, things will be different. There'll still be corruption and bull crap and things, but I think there will be more rail. There will be something, and the planet's also on fire. I'm supportive of getting whatever helps.
Sure.
The Mother Earth. Like, I have grandkids. Like, I want them to grow up on a nice planet that's not on fire, ideally.
And young people think about that too.
Bill, we'll have you back in 50 years to check your prediction. In the meantime, you do have a day job working for The Athletic. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing since you left Cranes and joined one of the leading sports outlets after the Detroit Free Press in the nation.
The leading national sports outlet.
National, okay, there's a distinction.
No, I had started covering the business side of sports in Detroit when I was still at Cranes and did that for years, and it was a lot of fun. And I had an opportunity to go to The Athletic in 2019. In June of 19, and we were working from home back then. So I was a veteran of working from home before everyone else was forced to work from home. But I read a lot about what goes on off the field, the ice, the court, that affects everything that happens on it. I read a lot about like TV viewership, what we're watching, why, how, in particular, cord cutting, all the massive sweeping changes in how we consume live sports, everything going behind streaming, behind the paywall. I read a lot about that. Just the finances, politics, social justice, taxes, all of the stuff that reflects wider society within sports, and boy, that has been a busy time for the last 3 years.
Have you written about Amazon Prime's Thursday Night NFL? Is that just an epic failure?
No.
It's not, because the viewership's way down.
It's an enormous success. The NFL traded reach for money. They were getting, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant from Amazon's perspective.
Oh, from Amazon's perspective? Yeah. Oh, my God. They have so much money that
it doesn't matter.
No, they had to do some make goods because I think they promised 12.5 million Nielsen rated audiences, and it was 9 something with just Nielsen numbers. The make goods were fine. That's so overblown, I think. They give some free streaming time to advertise. These deals are so complicated. I think everybody roundly within the industry was surprised because everybody thought, oh, they're going to get like 4 million or 3 million per game. And no, they got over 9 million on average. And the NFL is tickled.
Well, typically, don't broadcasters lose money like the Sunday night game? Don't they lose money but it's just a promo for
everything else on the network? Like
that's
NBC,
not a myth. That is.
Yeah, it depends on the deal, and these things are so complicated. How these things are structured, it's not just a check written out for we get to air Sunday Night Football. There are so many things, and sponsors are involved in all of this. But some of them are loss leaders, but man, they are huge bragging points, and they feel because of cord cutting, we've lost like more than 30 million households with cable, and streaming has come nowhere close to making up for the numbers or the dollars on that.
It's because we all share accounts.
Yeah, and that's why they want to.
I'm one of the cord cutters. I believe, man.
They want to crack down on the shared stuff. But that's such a massive change. But live sports are one of the few things that are sort of immune.
Sure.
Live sports and like election year cable news are the only things with a ton of eyeballs. And you get like Yellowstone. Like Yellowstone's current or last season premiered to like 9 million people.
Yeah.
If that show was that popular in the 80s, it would have premiered to like 40 million people. Those numbers are just gone.
With all the money that Amazon, Apple's got a lot of cash and they want to be a player in the game. Do you see eventually them going after college football, because that pie is so giant and it's only going to grow if they get involved, which means more pressure on these universities to pay the players.
Yeah.
Has there been talk about Apple or any of these streaming services really getting into the game with college football?
We're so in the history of TV, we're still very much in the infancy of streaming, but it's all happened so fast. This kid's growing very rapidly. I think everything's on the table, but the tech giants like an Amazon and Apple, Google and YouTube TV, they're toe dipping right now to see, like, is this something we want to do? Because they're using it to sell other stuff. Mm-hmm. Amazon's doing this so they can promote the Lord of the Rings thing, and others. And their product, and they sell physical stuff. Apple is a device maker, and they will bundle because they're doing the Friday night double headers with baseball, stuff like that. Those are marketing opportunities for them to sell products.
Well, do you think college football and basketball that it's just
they'll look at it? I think it's on the horizon. If the stuff they're doing now works, if it meets their internal success metrics, and that's not always dollars and cents.
Because what I'm getting at is, we heard that these are the last TV deals that are going to be this big. These conferences are not going to make this money.
You keep saying that,
and I'm like, that just sounds like speak coming from, presidents of universities who don't want to pay these players. And my hope is, more money will go in, so they do start paying the players.
Yeah, and I think if they find success with the professional sports, they will look at college football. I mean, that's number 2 after the National Football League in terms of eyeballs and maintaining big audiences.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing else after. I mean, it's just sort of peters out after that. It's so widespread. I think they'll look at that. The Big Ten deal. I mean, I think that's 7 years. And I think by the time we get to the end of those deals, if the streaming has been successful for the big tech companies, they will certainly be a player. And you see things like Major League Soccer is going behind. All of its matches will be on Apple TV under a special app that they're building within all of that. There will be some national games on linear television.
And HBO got into the game with men's and women's soccer, which
they're all looking at it. They're all trying to figure out what the strategy is.
Just doesn't seem to be a big commitment. They're all just
everybody's toe dipping because there's a lot of financial pressure on these companies are cutting back. Amazon's cutting 18,000.
They expanded so much though during COVID.
They did. A lot of these companies did, and people are paying the price for that. But we've never been in an era like this with our
It's kind of fun.
It's our entertainment delivery system.
Yeah.
The NFL or college football or women's soccer, whatever it is no different than Yellowstone or reruns of Seinfeld. It is entertainment that we watch. It happens to be live, so people don't TiVo it. They don't come back to it later. They want to watch it live, and the advertisers realize, okay, well, you're not getting me 50 million, you're getting me 10 million, but I can't get those 10 million or 50 million anywhere else. So here's a check. So the checks will keep coming as long as they can deliver. And that's why you see Nielsen is still around. For Amazon, that's why Amazon used Nielsen, because the advertisers were like, okay, you can tell me how many people are watching, but you can't tell me how much money they make. Is it a man? Is it a woman? Is it a kid? How old are they? Are they employed? The demographic information that Nielsen has gathered since the 50s, that stuff is worth its weight in gold because Visa and Joe's Widgets, they all want to reach those audiences, and those are the numbers and the proliferation of options.
Facebook has all that data.
But it's less. It is less granularly detailed because with Nielsen, you have the portable people meters. They know exactly who is watching, whether
that
it's
world.
yeah, it's grandma and who's on her, Social Security, or if it's dad who's making $1 million. Advertisers want to know. And like with Major League Soccer, we don't know if are they using Nielsen with Apple? We don't know. So that's a whole new world. We don't know how that's going to work. There's a ton of people across the industry who are watching that Apple MLS deal, because we're going to see, I think, a lot of stuff divvied up where, okay, some games will be on NBC, some will be on Peacock, some will be on this other service. And I think how this ends up is within a decade, 12 years, consolidation.
Oh, yeah.
Some of these streaming services will go away. Some will get bought up, and they're going to get bundled. Like cable, like a coaxial cable going into the side of your house, you're going to have a bundle you're paying for. And one of the things, and I read a lot about this stuff, one of the things I'll see in the comment section, and I have to look at the comment section, is people complaining like, okay, I'm watching, the Lions wiping out the Vikings on Amazon, but I want to flip at a commercial to go watch, a rerun of something else. Yeah. And you can't easily do that. You got to back out of it. And, my bedroom,
I thought
smart TV, it's a pain in the ass to do. And until it can be as easy as cable, where you're just using your Xfinity remote.
Sometimes it's just hard to find the game that you want because you don't know what service it has. Because
it's confusing.
The Big Ten, they have deals with I think 3 networks now, and so it's all over the place. And it's like I'm an old man now because I can't figure this out.
And even younger people. I did a story on this over the summer, maybe it was last year, and the confusion. Where the hell do I find anything? And we were running for a while during the NFL season, just a grid each week
of where
here's where your games are at, because some of them, like at least one of the London games was on NFL Plus or ESPN Plus.
That's the only the NFL Network.
Yeah,
Plus
it's the only place to watch that, and people were like, "What the hell? I got $1,000 riding on this game and I can't find it."
One of the most, and then you have people like Dick Vitale, who's live tweeting an old game because he thought it was a new one. Because there's so many reruns of all these because they have the property to do it.
It is an absolute Wild West.
Oh, no, kind of fun.
One of the things that I find really useful at the Free Press, and when I first saw it, you're insulting me. It says how to watch the game. And I thought, I know how to watch the game. I opened my eyes. But no, when you click on that on the Free Press website, it tells you what channel it's on, what network, what time. And it is confusing with all this stuff. And the funny thing is, so for years I was a guy who didn't have cable. I had to get cable for some Byzantine reason, and now it was
bundled with your internet.
Well, no, that wasn't even so much that. It's that one of the cable providers sponsored the Clark Park hockey game that I do.
So you got it for free?
No, but I felt obligated to get cable, so then I did get cable. And the reason I resisted for a long time, besides the cost, and I didn't want my kids to have access to content whenever they could just dial in, is because I couldn't figure out the remote control. And now Xfinity has a remote control where I press a button, I say, watch the Spartans, and it will find it for me. And if it wasn't for that, I would not have cable anymore, just because I don't want to get a master's degree in watching TV. I feel guilty watching TV. And if you make it simple for me,
I got to tell you, they all have that voice activated thing, but I watch a lot on Apple TV. Like that's the device I use to get to my television. So they'll do that if you want to talk to it, except my main thing is YouTube TV, and it doesn't search anything that's on there.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's always a 3-step process to find
it. It won't take you into the competing.
No, well, some of them, but not all of them.
So you cut the cord, but
I love it. I'm so glad I did.
YouTube TV, which is sort of not cutting the cord.
No, but it's a lot cheaper, and
what is it, $50-$60 a month?
Skinny bundles.
65, I think.
65.
But you know why I like it? Because I watch a lot here. I watch a lot on my phone.
Do they have the Big Ten network yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the
dinosaur.
And they have the cooking channel?
I don't know.
Because they only had the Food Network for a while, which is why we didn't get it. Because I like the cooking channel.
And that's one of the things. It's not just games. It's where are my channels? Do we get this channel? And
Bally Sports, right? That's been a
no Bally Sports on YouTube TV.
That's been a big pain for a lot of people.
Thankfully, all these teams suck, so I don't have to watch the Wings.
No, I've heard so many complaints about
Tigers.
That. People want to watch the Wings and the Tigers.
The whole regional sports network. That's like a subset of the chaos within. Because I read a lot about that. I mean, they're really in trouble. Bally, the owner Sinclair and Diamond Sports, which is the subsidiary, they're in a fight with each other.
Why?
The Diamond Sports has its own board. It was a wholly owned subsidiary. have worked on an agreement where they're pushing Sinclair. You know, Sinclair is one of the biggest local TV.
It would be a shame if anything bad happened to Sinclair because they're such a bastion of free speech.
Keep your politics out of this.
Yeah.
I'm just in the sports world.
Well, in and out of the sports world, Sinclair does not have, whatever your politics are, does not have a great reputation. But Diamond has pushed back to try and sort of separate themselves from that to whatever degree they can. But, you know, they have been waving the red flag left and right. Bankruptcy is a real possibility. You know, part of that is, hey, can we get a discount on all of these hundreds of millions of dollars we're paying in rights fees for the Wings, the Pistons, and, you know, I think it's 42 teams they have the rights for across, I think it's 19 networks. You know, but if they declare bankruptcy and a judge is like, okay, we're freezing all spending, well, the Pistons get, I think it's, they redid the deal a couple of years ago. It used to be $25 million a season. When it was the old owner, you can't just lose that money and, you know, all of a sudden, even though these are billion-dollar franchises and things, these are a key part of their revenue matrix that they rely on, which is why we're seeing chatter about, well, Major League Baseball right now is looking at, we'll just do it ourselves. We'll make our own basically direct-to-consumer streaming RSN system.
They're going to leave money on the table, though, like we just talked about, because you pay for the promo, the exposure of it, right?
Yeah,
so
all of
they
that.
do it themselves.
And it's enormously expensive.
Yeah,
like
the production cost.
It's a couple $100 million for like, I keep wanting to say Fox Sports Detroit, and it makes me a dinosaur now. Bally Sports, it's a couple $100 million.
If you said pass TV, then you'd be a dinosaur.
Yeah, exactly. Back to the 90s. But yeah, and it's a couple $100 million to just run one of these things. Like, it's just huge, you know, the talent, the equipment, the travel, just.
You would think, why wouldn't the leagues just negotiate a deal for all the teams? Or is it because the owners are like, no, we want to negotiate our own local deal? Why wouldn't they just negotiate and say, hey, all NBA games are going to be on Apple TV?
I think they would like to do that, but the rights are still all over the place. They haven't, all the leagues haven't collected all of the rights, local versus, you know, regional, national.
Probably because you had situations like the Illiches owning a network and owning a team and setting themselves up in perpetuity for things like that.
Well, they do have some arrangement. I mean, you can.
And
the
can
NBA
you imagine
has
telling the Yankees you don't get to run your own network? They're like, okay, then we
the
won't be
NBA has its own sort of amalgamation. I guess it's still locally produced across the country with each franchise, but you can
The league pass?
you can get the league pass and have access to every single local market in the country in Toronto.
Yeah, there's stuff like that. Why?
They still have the Vancouver Grizzly games on?
Yeah, Mike Bibby.
Yeah, they're just out of Memphis.
Point
His
guard.
big country, did he finally come into his
Country.
Yeah, and
own? Boy, who didn't see that being a bust?
Sharif Abdul Rahim. Who else played for them? Mike Bibby.
But the real issue with the RSN,
Deep on Vancouver Grizzlies.
the rights fees. I mean, it's a source of income, but the cable cutting.
Yeah.
The you know, when you lose almost
They can't-
40 million households,
They can't track us.
they're not making enough money to pay the rights fees. And if you all of a sudden have your own system, well, nobody's paying you. Like, you got to hire an
It's a
ad
shame if
staff
these leagues lost some money, wouldn't it?
yeah.
It's an utter shame.
I mean, it's, you know, there was a time like in the 90s, in the early 2000s, where a guy like Art Modell, when he was running the Browns into the ground, like when he signed Andre Rison before the 95 season, he had to go to, I think it was 9 different banks to get enough money to pay his signing bonus.
What?
Like, yeah, it was sports back then, you know, it was rich people owned them. But for a lot of them, it was the only thing that they owned. Armodale didn't own a bunch of other stuff. The Browns were his primary thing. The rights deals were not, you know, they were in the millions. And it still cost you millions to run your stadium and your team and all of that. But it was by the once Fox Sports started, they got the NFL, the NFC package in '94. Then it was off to the races. The $1 million deals became $1 billion deals, and the teams are a license to print money. Even during the recession, like some of the franchise values evened out a little bit, but even since then, you know, the NFL has, I think last count, 125 billion in media rights deals now with the new, the latest thing that they signed.
We got some catching up to do here.
Yeah, these teams are a license to print money now, but the thing is with like baseball, hockey, and basketball. I'm sorry, I'm having a senior moment. They have so much inventory, you know, 162 games or 82 games. You have to have an RSN. All the talk we see in the headlines are about the national deals. for MLB, NHL, and NBA, but it's the regional deals that are just as much money. And some of these teams own or have a big equity stake in their RSNs. Yes, with the Yankees.
I was just going to say, yeah.
There's a lot of them.
Or the Illiches when they had pass and things
When they had
like
pass, yeah.
Which I'm sure they've now sold all their interest in that.
Yeah,
But they must have had some contracts that carried over. So you can't get everybody to start on January 1st with anything because every deal has its own end and start and
and the
wrinkles
advertising. I mean, it's really complicated. But RSNs are expensive, but we don't have a replacement yet for the money that the teams need for their new delivery system. And everybody, and Bally Sports is rolling out its streaming thing, like, or what is it, $20 a month or something like that. You're not going to get the scale you need with that to make up from the cable, because
I'd rather buy the the Major League Baseball pass and use a VPN and get around it.
Something like that. But and your cable bill is what, $6 a month is Bally Sports?
What they pay them, that's.
And the best part is you can go get a sandwich at Rocco's Deli and get on the QLine and go down to the stadium.
What a way to wrap it up, Sean.
Rocco's isn't $6, but the QLine is free. So Sean brings it home.
Unless there's a car parked on the tracks.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that issue, too.
The QLine folks have talked a lot about improving operations and being able to get through the red lights and being able to get the cars off the tracks. And there has been improvement in the service. They had initially it was run by a company called TransDev. I understand they've gotten rid of them and now they're running it internally. And I think they are making steps to make it a better service. But for reasons we've talked about ad nauseum, you built it. You pay for it, and we'll see how we feel about it if you ever deign to ask us. But you can read more about my column. We'll put a link on our website, which is ML Soul of Detroit. If you're watching us on Facebook, we really appreciate that. Kevin says if a double-decker bus crashes into us, it would still be better value than the QLine. And we love it if you watch us on YouTube. If you can subscribe to our channel, which is Soul of Detroit, you can hit the bell for an alert. That will let you know when we go live, which is sort of like train arrival times. It says noon on the schedule, but we kind of get there when we get there. It also helps support the show. So if you want to support the show without dipping into your pocket, maybe because the government's already in there, just subscribe to YouTube channel Soul of Detroit. You can read Bill Shea's work in The Athletic. Bill, where can people follow you easily on social media?
Twitter for now. Well, it still exists.
Before you move to Mastodon?
Oh, God, I'm not moving anywhere. It's Bill_Shea 19.
Where's the 19 come from? Big Eiserman fan? Or
Bernie Kosar. I'm from Cleveland.
That's not Bernie Kosar.
And I was, it's the local boy made good. And I
understand you're even a big fan of his daughter's film.
God, even I wasn't going to bring that up.
I'm aware of, but have never seen.
It's also streaming, I understand, for a considerably cheaper rate on most platforms. But, Bill, we really appreciate you coming in. You know, the reason that we're able to write definitively about stuff like that is because there have been reporters who have been following this stuff and asking tough questions. Bill's always been one of those guys. So please support his work at The Athletic. And please, people bitched at me that they didn't want to read this column about the QLine because it's behind a paywall. Folks, it's less than $1 a month to subscribe to the Free Press, and you found out how somebody else is taking more than $1 a month out of your pocket. I really think it's worth it. It's an investment in being an informed person and just knowing what you're talking about, which really disqualifies everybody I've heard from on social media who don't know what they're talking about. But that's what you get for less than $1 a month. So thank you very much for joining us, Bill. And Mark, speaking of money, let's talk about some people who can help you hold on to a little bit of yours and maybe watch it grow.
Sure. Let's start with Hall Financial, right?
Of course.
A lot of people have credit card debt, especially January. These rates are pretty high. You got to pay off all those.
Christmas bills coming due.
Exactly. Hall Financial, they're here to help you become debt-free and get a cash-out refinance from Hall Financial. It's a great way to use the equity in your home to pay off high-interest credit card debt, and you can get a free 5-minute mortgage review with Hall Financial. That's all it's going to take to get you and your family in a better position. Get the money you need now with a cash-out refinance from Hall Financial. 866 Call Hall. Sean, that's CALLHALL, in case you didn't know.
I did not, but thank you for that.
Chat with them online at call.
I'd love to chat with them.
Hallfirst.com. Do you want me to spell that one out for you, too?
Please.
And if you have a lot of money and you're facing a
Why are
big
you looking at me? That's Mike.
Because you have a lot of
He
money.
has
Not me.
He's the one with the classic car collection out in the front yard.
One.
No, I got a
car.
62 Pontiac.
Okay, two.
We're building the empire.
I mean, never talk about that one. You always talk about the 85 Buick Riviera.
Because that's the new acquisition.
Because it makes him think when he's carrying malt duck in the back of his trunk and a tub of ice.
Well,
on
next
the way
time,
back from the Scratch Acid concert.
when you look for classic car number 3, you're going to want to know how that's going to affect your future
I do have a
financial goals.
2007 Ford Focus. I think that,
When you're
that
looking
very
for-
much qualifies as a classic car now.
When you're looking for car number 4? 5? How many cars do you have? Okay, 4.
About as
I-
many
I'm
as he
no-
has Smith's
I'm no Jay Leno.
tribute bands
All right.
lined up.
With 2
For the sake
daughters
of
and
the
a wife,
spot,
we have quite a fleet.
For the sake of the spot, just call Luke Nowacki and his team at Pinnacle Wealth Strategies. They're going to help you plan for all your financial goals, both today and well into the future. Call Luke today, 248-663-4748. He'll provide a complimentary consultation to see if your plan aligns with your goals.
And the one thing you'll find when you call Luke is that it'll make it all about you, sweetheart.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Royal Alliance Associates Inc. Member FINRAS.PC. Royal Alliance Associates Inc. is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Royal Alliance Associates Inc.
Oh man, the geeks have inherited the earth.
Did I do that?
What a dork.
Does him wanting to play with us again mean that he's turning into a geek, or we're turning into cool guys?
It goes without saying when you call David or you call Luke, please let them know that ML sent you, because they do appreciate knowing that that they're getting their money's worth out of us in the same way we feel like you'll get your money's worth out of doing business with them. Now, I lost my city council race in 2021. I don't know if we mentioned that before. My communications consultant, Sean Windsor, may not have given me the best advice. Starting with the haircut, he said that was a mistake. But
Led to a lot of great fights, though.
Oh, my God. Some epic battles. You can find those in our back catalog at mlsolvedetroit.com. We can also find links to our sponsors' websites. But the one thing I aspired to be was a good loser. And this week's geek is not a good loser. Of course, well, maybe not of course. Maybe you've never heard of Solomon Pena, but he lost his bid for a state house seat in New Mexico. And here's how he reacted, at least according to authorities. He hired some guys to go shoot up the house of a bunch of other lawmakers, 2 county commissioners, 2 state legislators, people who won their race. So here's what happened. Mr. Pena, and this is according to the New York Times, lost his election on November 8th in a landslide to incumbent, I know what that's like, to incumbent Democrat Miguel P. Garcia. Days later, Mr. Pena went on Twitter to express support for former President Donald J. Trump. No problem with that. He's endorsing him for 2024 presidential
Great guy.
race. But here's where he has a problem. To say that he had not conceded his own state house race. In fact, he thought that this election was rigged, he had been cheated, and apparently he was going to different people's homes with what he claimed was evidence that he had been cheated. Well, here's the thing. He got some guys to go shoot up these homes, and he didn't just say, go take care of business. He sent 4 men cash and text messages with addresses where he wanted to shoot the homes. Mr. Pena accompanied one of the men to the house of State Senator Linda Lopez on January 3rd and attempted to shoot, but the automatic rifle he was using malfunctioned. So not only is he a screwhead, he's a screw-up screwhead. In this case, that's the nicest thing we can say about him, because he actually didn't shoot into the house, but another man who was with him fired more than a dozen rounds from a handgun, some of which went into the bedroom of Ms. Lopez's daughter. So this is the gang that couldn't shoot straight when they were able to shoot at all. But it turns out shell casings found at Ms. Lopez's home matched a handgun that was confiscated after a traffic stop just 40 minutes after the shooting. The driver had an unrelated felony arrest. And guess where the car, or whom the car was registered to?
Do we have to?
Who?
Sean, I'm only going to say it
Play
once,
along,
but
Sean.
you're going to hear it twice.
Who?
Mr. Pena, Solomon Pena, the sorest loser we can find. You haven't won your race. You won't win your argument. You might not even win your court case. But guess what? You did win our Geek of the Week.
Oh, I think we have a vote coming in.
There's an all-night party in room 7609. time.
So I think by now you know the deal with Room 7609. We love to play obscure new wave music. Hopefully it's something that's outstanding that other people haven't heard, or it's something from a band that you love that just never got the attention it deserved. And we ask you to send us suggestions. This week's suggestion comes from Mr. Magoo, who is going local. He says that he thinks we're going to love Majesty Crush, a Detroit band, and their single, Number One Fan.